Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Do's and Don'ts of Online Proctoring. I'm your host, Tiffany Iacolino, and I work on the marketing team at IIBA. IIBA is an independent, not-for-profit professional association serving the global business analysis community. A recognized thought leader dedicated to elevating the discipline of business analysis, we provide our global community with relevant tools, resources, and networking opportunities. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions panel and we'll answer some of your questions at the end of the session as time permits. Today's webinar recording will be available for a limited time on IIBA's webinars archive page within 10 business days of the broadcast. Please also see the chat area for helpful links and resources on exam best practices. I'm here today with two amazing speakers to discuss exam tips and online proctoring tips. I'll start by introducing them. Welcome to Isabel Feher-Watters. Isabel is the Certification Programs Manager at IIBA and has more than 20 years experience building talent and leadership in the workplace through certification and credentialing programs. She holds several certifications, including her latest, the ICE Certified Credentialing Professional credential. Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And welcome to Dr. Michael White. Michael is the founder of the Business Analysis Doctor, a global business analysis training provider. He has been a business analysis practitioner for over a decade and holds a doctorate in business administration, CBAP, AAC, CBDA, CPOA, and his CSSGB certifications. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
So I'm going to open today's webinar with a quick poll. You can submit your responses using the voting tool in your control panel. The poll will be open for approximately 1 minute. So just a moment here while I get that poll ready. So I'm launching the poll here, and the question is, are you preparing for an online proctored exam in the near future? So choices here: yes, I am preparing for an online exam; no, but I'm considering it; or also no, but I'm scheduled in the near future. Let us know where you're at in your journey. I'm seeing answers flowing in. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We'll keep it open for another couple of seconds just to get a nice idea of where we're at. All right, I think we've got the most of them, and it's really interesting. So we've got a nice split here. I'm gonna end the poll now, but we're looking at almost a good 50-50 with quite a few of our attendees preparing, in the process of preparing for an online exam, and about 44% not yet, but considering it. So that's great. I'll just share the results so we can all have a look at that. So with that, again, thank you for your responses. That gives us some really great insights to kick off today's session. So without further ado, I will pass this over to Isabel to get us started. Welcome, Isabel.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tiffany. I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see it. And I believe you should be able to see it now.
Yes, I can see that. Perfect.
Right. Excellent. Well, it's very interesting. It looks like most of you are preparing and considering it. And some of you are not, but you know what? You're really at the right place at the right time. So let me start off with introducing this. And to say that, you know, I'm really pleased to be here today with Michael talking about this very important topic. It's a topic we don't tend to talk about on its own. But we know from the research and we know from our candidates that the better prepared they are for the exam itself, as well as for the experience of the online proctoring, the more confident they are going into the exam, the less stress they feel, and in fact, they have a better experience overall. Now at IIBA, we have several exams, and we do have some that are still at test centers, but we have 85% of our exams taken this way. So, it's not surprising because taking an exam on online proctored is so easy. It's convenient, it's flexible. It really is your exam your way. And so, whether you want to take it at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock at night, it's really up to you. It's your choice. So what is an remote online proctored exam anyway? Well, simply put, it's an exam that you take online using your laptop or your desktop computer, and where you have a proctor or exam supervisor who is monitoring you and checking you in. They are the person who's going to check your identification, and they're going to make sure that your room is compliant. The proctor is there with you throughout from beginning to end, making sure that everything goes seamlessly for you. And then, it just helps with the experience. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to start off looking at the big picture. Michael is going to begin with some general tips on studying for your exam. And then I'm going to jump right in with how to prepare for your online proctored exam. So Michael, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much for that lovely lead in there. Just do a quick transition here. All right. So now we're going to talk about some exam preparation tips and best practices. So like Isabel said earlier, these are more general. These are actually tips that you can incorporate for any type of exam. Any type of exam, not just the proctor, but it helps to kind of have the entire process kind of thought out and orchestrated, right? So you're going to do your study strategy, but also you have to have a strategy for your online proctoring experience as well. So I'm going to give you these general preparation tips and best practices here. All right, so what I will start with is actually having a study strategy, okay? This really involves knowing yourself, right? Every course I teach, I tell my students, understand how you as a learner learn best, right? Many of you may have heard of a visual or auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner, right? So the visual learners typically can look at things visually. They like process maps and things with different colors, whereas the auditory learner, you all do very well with presentations, things where people are speaking to you and you're listening to things, or audiobooks. The kinesthetic learner is a person who learns by doing, right? Sometimes you like taking active notes, or doing simulations is a really good way for you. Whenever you hear a person say, I learn best by doing, they're a kinesthetic learner. Now, most participants or exam takers are a combination of both. So I recommend definitely, if you're not sure which one you are, I recommend doing some experimentation to see which one you kind of fall in line with. And there are several different quizzes you can take online. If you just look up what's my learning style quiz, you can find a ton of them. But there's several benefits to that, right? Knowing your learning style really helps you maximize your learning potential. It also gives you, different, like a boundary of being able to choose the techniques, right? So when you know your learning style, then you have to determine the optimal mode of study, right? So, many courses are live courses, on-demand courses, or self-study, right? So depending on where you fall in your learning style, that would dictate maybe the course that works best for you in terms of learning, right? And so we can't assume, so your don't here is that you don't want to assume that any certain method of study is effective, right? A lot of people like to say, oh, I like note cards, but the kind of the litmus test is, are you remembering the information, right? If you're constantly going over something and going over it, but you're not remembering the information, chances are you are not studying in a way that is aligned with your study style or your learning style, okay? All right, so now that we get that out of the way, then you have to create a study schedule. So first of all, the do is to create a study schedule. The first thing you need to do there is to identify the study requirements, right? So all of the certifications might have different levels, but the general ones are the CBAP and the CCBA. You can expect 150 to 200 hours of study time. And for the ECBA, about 100, maybe to 150. So that's like the general ones for those. Other ones might have different ones, but those are just the core ones. So I just gave some general ranges there. But then you take those total requirements and kind of come up with a comprehensive study schedule. So now you have to look at the total number of days, the study windows within those days, and that's going to create your overall schedule, right? So for example, if you're going to study for, let's just say, using 100 hours total because you're doing the ECBA, and then you figure out that Sundays and Tuesdays and Thursdays work best for you. You can do 2 hours on Sunday, 4 hours on Tuesday, 3 hours on Thursday, right? That's about, and 4 hours on Saturday. That's about 13 hours a week, right? So then 13 hours a week for 100 hours total, that's about 8 weeks total. So what you want to do is give yourself 8 weeks plus time away from your starting point to when you would schedule it out about, right? But you always want to give yourself like maybe, so 8 weeks is like 2 months, but you always want to give yourself just a little bit of cushion in between, just in case things don't go exactly as planned, right? So the don't here would be, do not cram your studying, because even though cramming can be effective for learning information and retaining it at that moment, it doesn't help you remember things long term. So we want you to remember these concepts long term. Okay. All right. So now your next tip is to prepare or to have a time management study. And this time management applies, it's a little bit different from your studying, because this applies to during the exam. Okay, so basically you have to determine how much time that you have to spend on each question. Okay, so you can kind of work backwards there. So what I typically recommend is for people to start with the amount of time that you're going to leave yourself for review. So if you have one of the longer exams, I would say leave about 30 minutes for review. And if you're on a shorter exam, leave about maybe 15. Like the ECBA, you can leave about 15 minutes for reviewing questions. So you start there, and then with the time that you have left from the total time that you have to take the exam, you basically divide that in minutes, or you can even do seconds, by the number of questions you have. So that would determine how much time you should be spending on each question, and then how much time you should have for review. I tell people, do not leave any question blank, and you never want to spend too much time on any one question, because if you find yourself spending too much time on questions, what's going to happen is the questions towards the end that you could have answered correctly, if you had gotten a chance to read them, you're not even going to have a chance to look at those. So if you can't answer that question within the allotted time, mark an answer and mark it for review, and then you'll look at that later during your review window. Okay. Also, you want to arrive at least 20 minutes early to allow yourself the security clearance with your ID and things like that. I believe Isabel's going to talk a little bit about that later, but that can be incorporated into your time management study as well. So your don't is, don't spend too much time on one question. Okay. Now, when you are preparing your study, the do is to have an answer approach for each question type. So as many of you might know, the exam blueprints have different types of questions, right? So for example, the IIBA would most likely have knowledge-based questions and definition-based questions, whereas the CCBA has scenario-based questions, and then the CBAP has scenario-based questions as well as case study questions. You would not be addressing each of these questions the same way, right? You basically want to do your own research on how to best handle these types of questions. The tip I'll give you that could apply to all is to look out for keywords in the question as well as negative keywords. So don't overlook things like which one of these is not an approach that would be used, right? A lot of people tend to miss those things. But one exam tip I will give you for the case study is that the case study typically has 4 questions associated with that one case study, and then maybe the last paragraph will change. So don't go and try to read that entire, 3 or 4 paragraphs as you read each of those case study questions. Just kind of read it the first time, and then on the next ones, you can kind of skip to the last paragraph or so. Okay, so the don't here is to don't approach every question type the same, because you'll lose if you do that. All right, now let's look at exam day success. So on the day of the exam, let's talk about what you need to do. All right, so you need to have confidence, right? If you do the things that we've talked about earlier, you'll be better prepared and you will be ready to execute your strategy. So you have to have the strategy first. You're going to this is why you have to do simulation exams. So when you're doing your simulation exams, you're exercising your strategy enough times so that you can kind of, tweak the strategy, figure out which parts of the strategies you like best and which ones are effective, right? So take enough simulations that you have enough time applying your study strategy, right? So this will definitely give you the confidence you need there. Just as a general benchmark, I typically recommend at least 4 simulations, but take as many simulations as you need. If that's 10, if it's however many, take as many as you need so that you are consistently hitting the target scores that are presented to you by whoever your provider is of that simulation exam. So the don't is do not feed into test anxiety. We know that that's a real thing. At some point, I believe I had test anxiety, but I think actually having a strategy, feeling prepared and kind of emboldened by what you've done so far and feeling organized, that will really help you kind of overcome that. Also, taking those simulations and consistently hitting those target scores is going to definitely help you feel more confident there. Be well rested. So this is general, right? But it does warrant to be said because you like I said earlier, you don't want to cram. You want to be well rested. If you feel like the day before you don't want to do any studying and you just want to focus on getting your mental state in order, that's fine. Just be sure that you're getting an adequate amount of sleep on the night before. I would even say for that entire week leading up to your exam, get an adequate amount of sleep and rest, because all of that does trickle in and impact you on the day of study. Also, be sure to take the exam at least 1 hour after you're awake, because studies do show that the brain takes 30 minutes to an hour to become fully awake. Some places even say 2 hours. So, but just don't try to take the exam first thing in the morning because your brain might still be warming up, right? Also, studies also show that doing light exercises or stretching can help pump blood to the brain, right? And this can help you think more clearly during the exam. So I definitely recommend that. Even getting some fresh air or a little bit of sunlight prior to the exam can help boost that oxygen flow. So don't cram or pull an all-nighter the day before the exam. All right, and knowing your optimal time of the day, this is something I recommend for everyone. You hear people say, oh, I'm a morning person or I'm a night owl. Having that understanding of when you are most organized, most productive, and most energized, right? This can take a little bit of experimentation. If you don't know, you can kind of take notice of that. If you don't know your most productive time of the day, just kind of start observing when you're the most productive and when you feel the best throughout the day. And then those will be the ranges that you would feel the most productive. So for me, I have like a range, like between noon and 4 p.m. I'm like on fire. But after that, I start mellowing out just a little bit, right? So some people do really well first thing in the morning. They're just like, a mile a minute. And I'm just like, give me a minute, to get myself together. So definitely have an understanding of when you are most productive throughout the day. So that's going to be the time range that you're going to want to schedule your exam, right? You don't want to schedule your exam outside of your optimal time. But you also want to take into consideration when there is the least amount of distraction. So if you have to schedule it when your family's away or when the pets are, I don't know, locked up, I don't know. So when there's the least amount of distractions is something you should also take into consideration. But also when your environment is most conducive to focus, right? This can be a lot of different things, right? Making sure that your area is decluttered, it's organized, that can all impact how clearly you are able to think, right? But that goes hand in hand with the distractions as well, right? So these kind of tie in, but this one looks more at some of the external factors. So don't schedule your exam haphazardly because it's just not optimal, right? You just want to tip the scales in your favor so that you can pass that exam on that first attempt. All right, and so in alignment with all of this, you want to have a focused mental state. So your do is to have a focused mental state. Eat brain food, okay? That's nuts, blueberries, spinach, salmon. These are all brain foods. If you're not sure what brain foods are, look them up. Also, staying hydrated is very important for your brain. Don't drink too much coffee without drinking water first, because coffee is good for clarity, but it also dehydrates you. So make sure you're hydrating yourself before you have your coffee. Avoiding sugary foods. This can make your brain go a little haywire. So you lose the ability to concentrate sometimes if you do things that are too sugary. Again, being well rested contributes to your mental state. And also, again, like I mentioned in the other slide, make sure that your testing environment is organized and not a lot of clutter. The least amount of things that you have on your desk during that time, the better, because you'll be able to focus more on what you're doing. Okay, so do not neglect your mental state. That's your don't. All right, so I have given you some best practices that I hope will help you while you're studying and on the day of the exam. Now I'm going to pass it back to Isabel to get down to the core of the proctored exam.
Great, thank you, Michael. I will share my screen.
Okay.
Here you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
So that was great. It's really about knowing what to expect, preparing and getting ready for that exam, isn't it? So you've given us a really good summary of things that we need to prepare in terms of the content, but even in terms of ourselves. So let's take a look now very specifically at some of the key things that you need to be aware of, and you need to know what to expect and to be prepared for in terms of the remote proctored experience. So we're going to talk about these top three things: system requirements, your identification, and your workspace and exam room setup. So let's start off with the system requirements. Well, one of the things you want to do for sure is to prepare this ahead of time. So you want to know what to prepare ahead of time, so that once you get into exam day, you're calm and you've got all of this set up. Prepare ahead of time. Make sure that you have stable, reliable internet connection, if possible hardwired, because you don't want to, sort of slip off your bandwidth, or you don't want anything to go wrong, and you want to feel really comfortable with this. In fact, this is one of the common issues that are faced by test takers, where they don't have enough bandwidth, and it means that it either may interrupt the exam or even cancel the exam altogether. Make sure that you are using a laptop or a desktop only. So one of the things you don't want to be doing is you can't use your phone, you can't use a tablet, you can't use a Chromebook. So please make sure it's a laptop or desktop only, and that you have a functioning webcam and microphone, that it is working. Because what is going to happen is that the proctor needs to be able to see you and hear you. Even though you can't see them, your communication will be through type chat with them, but they do need to be able to see you. So you want to make sure that the webcam and the microphone are functioning properly. You also want to use your personal rather than your work computer, if possible. Because what happens is our work computers might have something that blocks the exam system from taking over, through the network or firewalls or VPN. So we do highly recommend that you use your personal laptop to take an exam, or your personal desktop. Chrome browser is best for success. And also remember, if you are using your laptop, do plug into your power source, because you don't want to be running out of power halfway through the exam and then scrambling trying to find your power cord. Now, another issue that comes up, where sometimes you're scrambling at the last minute, so we want to prepare you for it, is that only one monitor is allowed when you take the exam. So, like many of us, we might have 2, 3, some of my colleagues have 4 monitors. There's monitors everywhere. Please, if that's you, unplug them, turn them away, put them on the floor if possible, just to make sure that there's only one that's plugged in. Because once you get into your exam day, the proctoring system will pick that up, and the proctor will ask you to disconnect your other monitors. And, Michael alluded to this as well, too. Don't leave stuff to the last minute. Don't be scrambling with this. Check your system requirements and everything out ahead of time. Now, fortunately, PSI has a system check that you can do. And the system check can be found in the emails we send you from IIBA. It can be found on our website and in many other places. But do the system check. And make sure that you do it, like a week ahead, the day before, the day of, to make sure that everything is working for you. The other thing with this is do the system check with the same device and at the same place that you're going to take the exam. So for example, don't go to the coffee shop and do the system check, because that's not a good thing. Do it exactly where you're going to be taking the exam. So this will ensure that your bandwidth is good. It'll support the online proctoring. It's going to make sure that your camera and microphone are available for testing as well. And really, it can prevent a lot of issues and a lot of hiccups along the way. So what you want to see when you do the system check is you want to see that wonderful green check mark, system check passed, and then that should give you a good, confident feeling that your system is ready for the online proctor experience. Now, the second thing we want to take a close look at and prepare ahead of time is your identification. Do make sure that you have government issued photo identification and that it is one of these listed here. These are listed in our guide that we provide. They're listed on our website, and I'm sure that a lot of our providers, our education providers, also provide this information and stress it. So please make sure that you have this form of identification. And when you have this form of identification, be sure that it's current and signed. Don't show your passport from 10 years ago, because that's not going to work. It will delay or cancel your exam. Make sure it's an original and not a photocopy. You want to be showing that original to the camera. Also, make sure that it's in Western characters. If your identification is not in Western characters, please contact our office at IIBA. And we've got information up here in terms of links and email addresses, but it's really simple. It's either information or info@iiba.org or certification@iiba.org. But please contact our customer support and they will help you through this. The other thing, and this is one of the main reasons that identification, that delays happen during the ID process, is that you want to make sure that the name that you registered with is the same name that's on your identification, right? Same first and last name, because people get tripped up in this. So for example, my identification is my full name, Isabel Feher-Watters. But let's say I decided to register with some nickname. So, I registered with Iz or Izzy or Bella or Isabella. Well, if I registered with one of those names and I show my passport or my driver's license with my full name, I am not going to be allowed to take the exam. Simple. The first and the last name has to match. The name that you registered with has to match your identification. And I guess the don't here is don't leave these discrepancies to the last minute. Make sure that they are aligned. If your name isn't aligned for some reason, please contact our office our IIBA office, and they will work the details through with you, and they will make sure that the name that you registered with will be aligned to your identification. Okay, the third one. So the third one that you want to prepare ahead of time is you do want to set up your workspace and exam room so that it's nice and quiet, clear. You want it to be a private room. You don't want people, you don't want it to be an area where people are walking through, where your pets are roaming around. You want it to be free from all distractions, right? And you really want to think about it as being like a test center. Think about it as being a test center. A test center is nice and clean, and there's nothing in there that doesn't belong. So, sometimes we might have knickknacks on our desk or a plant or something like that. Remove all of that. For the exam, remove all of that. Only what is totally necessary should be on your desk. Now, use a desk or a table. So this is an interesting question that came up for me a while ago. Somebody asked the question, hey, I'm using my laptop. Can I put it on my lap? Can I lay in bed and do my exam? Well, the short answer is no, you can't do that. So please make sure that you've got a hard surface and that's what you're working on. And again, clear your workspace of any materials, unauthorized items, because you want to avoid any alerts or violations from the proctor. And we're going to talk about what some of those items are now. Well, first of all, what's allowed? Well, good news, you can have a bottle of water or a glass of water, as long as there's no label on it. You don't want any kind of labeling or marking on it. It has to be clear. You can have a piece of paper, as long as the piece of paper is blank. Sometimes we like to doodle or we like to make a couple of notes. So we like to have that. If you do have that, the proctor will probably ask you to show the front and the back of it to make sure it's clear. You could also have a small whiteboard, but be aware that at the end of that, you'll have to erase anything you've written on the whiteboard, and you also have to tear up your notes. So, and in front of the proctor, so the proctor sees that. Now, the other thing is that we do have 7 exams at IIBA, and they're all a little bit different, right? So please do refer to our website at the IIBA site, or the guide to online proctored exams for full details. You might want to know, depending on the exam, some exams have breaks, some don't. And so there's a few things that differ. But the items on this slide are allowed for all exams. So a few other things that aren't allowed. No food or drinks. Don't be chewing gum either. Any kind of electronics, headphones, earbuds, anything like that are not allowed. So if you have a headset on, you will be asked to remove it. Any kind of electronics, watch. I have a Fitbit watch on here. To take an exam, I would remove that, put it in another room, get it out of the way. So anything like that, the proctor is looking for. And the proctor will ask you to remove, notes, reference material, personal belongings. You don't want to have coats or purses, wallets, hats, anything like that around either. Again, if they're in the room with you, move them to another room so that they're not in view, because on exam day, you are going to have to scan your room, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Now, actually, you know, when I was talking to Michael the other day, he had also talked about something that that wasn't allowed, and he ended up removing. Michael, do you want to share your story with us?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story because they tell you that you can log in at least 15 minutes early or up to 15 minutes early. I definitely recommend doing that because you never know what they're going to ask you to remove. But I had saw in the guides that you can't have paper on your desk. And so my desk is set up to where my printer is like literally right here on my desk. And so when I did this pivot of the room with my camera, he asked me to remove the printer. And I thought he was saying the printer paper. I was like, oh, you know, the printer, it's empty, doesn't have paper. He said, no, I need you to remove the printer. So I had to physically get up, you know, disconnect my printer and move it into the next room. I don't know what they thought I could have done with the printer, but that was just something that I had to do. So just be, like I said, you know, keep your area as only the bare essentials, the desk, the computer, and that's it. You know, like don't make it hard for yourself, because I also have, like right now, my laptop is on like an elevator. You know how you can lift your elevator up and down? You don't want to have that, because that's going to cause additional things, because they're going to ask you to lift it up and they want to look under that. And it literally really just try to have your desktop and the computer. You know, I think I may have had a tube of chapstick. They asked me to remove that. So they are really strict about it. I think for me, it was still less of a hassle than actually having to travel to a center, but it is really, you know, it can be a little much. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
Take
no.
all these rules and take notes.
That's right. You know, those are great examples. And those are things that are just, you know, we're used to having around us, like the printer, but also the chapstick. You mentioned the chapstick, right? And it's like, oh yeah, you know, do I have a chapstick here? Do I have extra pens, or who knows? And those have to be removed. I had somebody ask me once that they have a TV up on the wall, and they said, well, what about the TV? Well, and the person said, I can't remove the TV. So what do I do? Right. So what you do is you turn the TV off, and if possible, unplug it. And you could put a sheet or a blanket over it as well too. So, you know, that's usually, I think, pretty easy to do. So again, it's those kinds of things. It's like, you know, think like like an exam center. What would the exam center? It would be totally clear of everything, right? So that's the mindset you need to have. So that was great. Thanks for that example, Michael.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So the other thing is, in terms of this, be mindful of your actions. So, you know, when you know, in our daily lives, when we're working, we are, you know, we're moving around, and we're, you know, out of the view of the camera and stuff. But when you're taking an exam, remember the proctor needs to be able to see you. Do stay within the view of the camera. Do keep your eyes on the screen, and do remain at your workspace. Like, don't get up and walk around, because that's not allowed. You know, for keeping your eyes on the screen, I mean, you know, sometimes depending on how we think and how we focus on things, you might have a tendency to maybe look off in a corner, you know, to think about something, or look down at the ground. I don't know, but, you know, be mindful of your tendencies to do that. And then just try to, you know, keep your eye on a screen, on a spot or whatever, if you need to focus, to think about something, but don't wander, you know, don't have your eyes wandering around. So the other thing to be mindful of is, you know, don't read the exam questions out loud or whisper. don't look at something and start whispering. And sometimes that helps us think, for sure, because we hear it, but please try not to do it during the exam, because the proctor will send you, will warn you or alert you to that. Don't cover your mouth either. So, sometimes when we're thinking and, maybe we cover our faces and be mindful of that. If that's something that you do, be mindful of it. And for sure, please do not cover the camera. That is totally not allowed. Again, throughout the whole session, the proctor needs to be able to see you and hear you as well too. And of course, on your piece of paper, yes, you can doodle. Yes, you can make a couple of notes, but please do not write down any exam content at all. So, that is for the integrity and the security of the exams. And so they are very careful to look out for things like this. The other thing I wanted to note here is that if you do have special accommodations or require special accommodations, please contact our office. They can perhaps give you additional time or a special exam reader, depending on the disability and your need. They will ask for some kind of a medical note. But please just contact them ahead of time to make sure that, if you need a special accommodation, we can set it up for you. So there you are, you're prepared. You're prepared with all three of the items. You've got your equipment systems all ready to go. The identification is good. You got your clean, quiet workspace. What can you expect on exam day? Well, first of all, and Michael alluded to this as well too, log in early. Log in 15 minutes before the scheduled time. Now, I will say don't log in too early, because if you log in an hour before, or maybe even a half an hour before, you might, it might show up as an error, and it's because it's not ready for you yet. The system's not ready for you yet, so don't panic. Just go in 15 minutes ahead of time and then wait. You will be greeted by the PSI test administrator or proctor, and they will be there right on time, or if they're a minute or so late, again, don't panic. They will be there. The other thing to note is that while you are checking in and your identification is being checked and such, if it takes 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending, don't panic. Your exam time will not start yet. Your exam time will actually not start until the full check-in, everything is done. If you had to remove something from your desk or your office, you've done all of that. Once you're ready, the proctor will ask you, can I launch the exam? And you say yes, and that's when the timing starts. So there's no need to panic at all. So yeah, log in. The proctor will begin a chat process and activate the screen share. Again, they'll be able to see and hear you. You can chat with them at any time. You're always going to get their assistance. And a special note too, that both the check-in and the whole exam session is recorded by PSI. It is recorded and stored in a secure environment. But that is if there's any questions later on. So just be mindful of that as well too. So there you are. There's the secure check-in procedure is on its way. You've downloaded the secure browser. That you've presented your identification to the camera, right? And then you'll be prompted to scan the room. So for some of you, if you've taken a PSI exam before, the instructions have changed a little bit on this, and it actually has made it easier for us. So what you need to do now is there's a total of 4 small videos that you'll use to scan the room. And the good news is each one of them you can review and redo as needed. So, if you do your room scan and you find that, oh, geez, I missed a wall, or, something happened, you can redo it. So that's the good news. So what'll happen is you'll be prompted. You'll have 4 separate videos that you'll have to do. One is the room scan and workspace. One is floor to ceiling. One is the self-scan, and one is the desk surface. So for each of these, you'll get 15 seconds. And, I highly recommend you just, you take the video, you take your camera, or you take your laptop, because that's what you're going to scan with, and you scan nice and slow and thoroughly around the room. Take it, view it. If it looks good, submit it. And then in a few seconds, it will upload. If it's all good, then you go on to the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. If there are any questions, once these are uploaded, or for some reason the proctor sees something that they want to address, they will come back to you and address those. And remember, the proctor is looking for security risks and prohibited items. So they will look at, what's on your walls. Is there any electronics? Is there any of those things that, you can't have? Are they there in the room? And they will ask you to remove them. The other thing on exam day, as you're checking in, is as you go through all the different check-ins, a screen will come up which will ask you to agree to exam admission rules. And there, you sort of go through the screen with things like, I will not talk, whisper, or move my lips. Well, if you do, the proctor will alert you to it, but they want you to acknowledge that those are the kinds of things that you're not going to do. You're not going to write down exam content. You're not going to try to capture screen content of the exam. You are going to try to face the camera and not go out of view of the camera. So you just, you read to the end of that, and then you agree. Hopefully you agree to that. You do have the choice not to, of course, but then that will cancel the exam, which is something you don't want to do. If you do cancel the exam, it will be, you'll lose the fee as well too. But anyways, it is, the better prepared you are and know what to expect. These things that you read through are very simple, and you would definitely agree and then move on. So there you are. So you would move on and complete your exam, and then get, then find out some results. So be prepared, know what to expect, and really enjoy your exam experience. It's such a great, convenient way to take an exam. You don't have to go anywhere. You're in your own environment. It's much more comfortable, but please know what to expect. Read our information page. Definitely go through in detail the guide to online proctored exams. We put that together. We put lots of information in there for you, and it's really, really important for you to be aware of that information. And also watch the PSI video. The video is great. It literally, an individual walks into a room, and you can see her room, and you can see how clear it is. She shows her ID to the camera. She does a scan, and it really gives you, that good sense, the good warm fuzzy feeling of what you can expect when you're online taking your exam. And of course, contact our office for any exam accommodation as well. So I'm going to stop there. We've looked at preparing for the exam, the content, and preparing yourself for it, and also then preparing for their online remote experience and getting everything prepared ahead of time so you know what to expect. And I'm going to see if you have any questions, but in the meantime, I have a couple of commonly asked questions that I want to share with you because they've been asked many times. So one of the questions is, how do I end my exam session? So this might seem really simple, you just end it, but people do ask the question, and once in a while people end it differently. So really it's a simple process. It's fairly intuitive. What you see on my screen here is you see the way a typical exam question would look on the screen. This is just a simple multiple choice. You see you've got your question, you've got 4 options. If you're doing a case study or scenario, then you're going to have more text in terms of the question, but it looks like this. And then what happens is when you've completed the exam, at the end of it, you will be notified if you have any unanswered questions or flags, which means that you can go back and you can answer them, or you can look at the ones that you've flagged. You may have flagged some questions because they seemed like you weren't sure of them or something you wanted to go back to. So you have an opportunity. You will see along the bottom of your screen, you will see the ones that that you would go back to. You'll also be asked to confirm that you are ready to end the exam. So you might end the exam here, but then another window comes up. Are you really ready to quit your exam? And then another one says, are you really, really sure you want to end the test? And then when you press OK there, it will, you can cancel or return. But of course, when you press OK, it will submit. As a matter of fact, the proctor will also, in the type chat, will also ask you if you're ready to finish and submit the exam. So you do get a number of times when you are going through to make sure that you have completed it and that you are ready to submit. So when you submit, and this is another question that's often asked, is will I get my exam result right away? Well, as soon as you submit, you do. What you get is you get a screen that looks like this, and you can see that this is a congratulatory screen. So this is saying congratulations, you have passed the IIBA exam. If you're not successful with the exam, what you'll get is you'll get a screen that says, unfortunately, you were not successful. IIBA will send information to you about your results. Now, what happens after that is within 2 business days, IIBA will send you an email, and the email will have the information, again, confirming that you've passed or failed. It will also have some additional information on it. So we don't give you a score of a number, but what we do is we provide results that show higher, comparable, or lower in each of your knowledge areas. And that information will provide you and show you sort of the areas that you are weaker in or stronger in. And they're good to know, but they're especially good to know if you were not successful with the exam and you need to retake the exam. The ones that are lower are the areas you would probably focus your study on. You would, again, of course, study all areas, but those are areas that you would focus so that you are prepared for a retake of the exam. So those are my 2 commonly asked questions. I don't know, Tiffany, if we've had any questions come up yet.
We do. We've got a ton of questions in the comments area and in the question box. So thank you both. This has been amazing. I can't believe how many things that there are to consider. And Michael, when you mentioned the tip about the elevator on your desk, I was looking at mine in front of me, thinking I would have never have thought of that. And so many people have migrated to those sit and stand configurations on their desks. So that was amazing. I'm going to jump into some of the questions that have been pouring in to try to get through some of them. So there was a couple about the name. So one said, I've registered with only my first and last name, but I have 2 more names in the middle. Would this be a discrepancy? What are your thoughts on that, Isabel?
Yeah, it is a discrepancy if it does not match your identification.
Okay.
Yes. So if your identification does not look the same way, it is a discrepancy. So the best thing to do is contact our customer service team, and they will help you through it. They will probably change your name on the system as to the name you registered with.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So there was a couple of different questions from a variety of attendees asking about mock exams for a variety of exams, ECBA, CCBA, CBDA. Michael, I don't know if you wanted to take that question in terms of if there's anything that, any suggestions or tips you have there.
Yeah, we definitely provide those at the Business Analysis Doctor. You're more than welcome to check out our website at thebadoc.com under training, and then you can go into all courses, and we have all the resources that we provide. And that is one of the links that we provided earlier in the exam study resources. So if you all want to get that link, you can scroll back up to that resource there.
Yes, and I'll also be providing all of those links in a follow-up email to all the attendees. So all the resource links as well as a copy of the slides. So you'll have that as a follow-up as well. I'm going to jump into another question here, and I think either of you can give your perspectives, but the question was, are there any active discussion forums linked to IIBA exams? I know chapters come to mind, like certain chapters might have something. I know maybe something on LinkedIn perhaps, but if any of you have anything additional to add to that.
Mhm. That's an interesting question.
Mhm.
I actually
Mhm.
do have two of them. I have one on LinkedIn and
Okay,
one on Facebook. So whichever platform you prefer, it's just called IIBA Certification Prep. CBAP, CCBA, ECBA, and it's dash the Business Analysis Doctor. So you can just search for that. And those are dedicated for people who are actively taking those exams.
Mhm.
I would say that the one on Facebook is a little more lively. So if you're looking to really engage with people, the one on Facebook tends to be a little more interactive.
good to know. Good to know. Thank you. So here's a question that's a little bit specific. Isabel, can you rent a room in the library and take your exam and do all the system tests from there? Is that question. I think with this individual had some concerns, I guess maybe with their setup. She said, I don't want to end up in my bathroom floor again. So is that a possibility, like renting a room in the library, or like I even know that there's some places where you can rent, like, a cubicle or an office setting for a day. Is that something that that could be done?
Yeah, absolutely. Just it would need to meet the same specifications. So make sure it's a private room. There is good internet connection. There's not going to be anybody walking in the door. You can put a sign up on the door, exam in progress, do not disturb, or something like that. Then yeah, absolutely. It's a private room, well lit, as long as it meets all the specs, for sure. And you know what? For some people, that is a better option, than working in an environment. Sometimes at home there's lots of distractions. Sometimes at home too. I mean, I'm in a room that I can shut the door, but if I go downstairs into the main part of my house, it's pretty open, so that wouldn't be conducive to writing an exam. But this room would be. But if I wouldn't have a room like this, then absolutely going and renting from a library or an office space would be certainly something that you could do.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I agree with that. I would just add that a lot of the libraries I go to, the private rooms have a glass facade.
Mm.
So I would say probably steer away from the ones with the glass facade and get one that's, has a real wall, because I can imagine them having an issue with that.
Great point. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
great tip. I've got another question here saying, I've heard people saying they've faced issues while taking online exams with a MacBook. Do you have any idea if it's fine to take an exam with a MacBook?
I have a Mac, and I've taken at least 4 proctored exams with that, so I haven't had an issue.
Yeah,
Perfect.
so that's interesting, because I usually recommend not to, because I know people have had issues, and it may depend on the type it is, or it's good to hear, Michael, that you haven't had issues using Mac, but I know others have. So I think, maybe if that's what you have, that's what you want to use, then do the system check or contact PSI directly. We do have phone numbers for them, and we do have email that you can get in touch with them directly and ask them. And then they will ask specs about your MacBook, and you can take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Perfect.
system check is definitely key, doing that earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the links we'll be sharing. So I'd like to just thank you both. We're right at time, and we could talk about this topic probably for another hour or so with all these, nuggets of information and really, really valuable tips. But thank you for your participation in this session. As mentioned, the best place to reach Michael is social media, on LinkedIn, or directly on his website at thebadoc.com. And Isabel is available on LinkedIn, or even through IIBA.org. So thank you again for your invaluable insights, your personal experiences, and just overall best practices. That was amazing. And finally, thank you to our attendees for being here today. As I mentioned, you will see a follow-up email from us. Please feel free to respond with any questions or comments you have. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Great. Bye, everyone.
Bye.